Okay, got an email from YouTube. Let me hit play on that.
Hello, 3C Films. I want to play a game. If you're listening to this, it means your last review was demonetized. Oh, but you were so careful, blurring out and censoring every frame. How could this have happened to you? Most YouTubers will find a sponsorship or recuperate the loss in other ways, but not you. You would not do that to your audience. Your game? Continue reviewing the remaining 6 Saw movies, even though you know they will likely meet the same fate. Monetize or die. The choice is yours, 3C.
Demonetization or not, I was something I was fully expecting when reviewing the Saw movies, so forgive me if I try to go a little extra family-friendly this time around. If you'd like to help, comment something that you would think you'd see in family-friendly channels, like puppies, teddy bears, or just the phrase, man, this was family-friendly. We're gonna trick that algorithm together. Nevertheless, let's chuck along with the next 3 Saw movies as part of this review, Saw 4, 5, and 6. Now, like I mentioned in my previous video, people had jumped off the Saw train at this point. Saw 3 kinda left a sour taste in some people's mouth. A bunch of us still were on and were like, give us more Saw, baby! That was for sure my mindset here, and with these next 3 movies, they almost blend together, at least 4 and 5. I've watched both of these movies at least like 10 times now, and in my mind, before I hit play on 4 and 5, they all mesh together. I swear, I get things mixed up and I'm like, oh, this happens in 4. Well, I thought that wouldn't happen until 5. There could be a Saw Trap where you show me a scene from Saw 4 or 5 and I have to pick from which sequel it was. There's a good chance I'm not making that out alive. But this would become the soap opera era for the Saw franchise, where the real Saw fans are sticking to it for the story, the overarching characters and twists and turns you take with them, while each sequel will give you a side story. If you're tagging along your girlfriend or someone that's never seen a Saw movie, at least there will be a side story for them to get invested in. And I won't really argue with anybody who calls these next couple of Saw movies bad, because they for sure take a big dip in quality compared to the last 3, but I'm in it for the story at this point. So let's just go ahead and hit play with the next Saw movie in the franchise, Saw 4. And with the opening of Saw 4, you get one of the most shocking, grotesque things that will ever be put to screen, Jigsaw's wiener. I'm not getting that monetization back, am I? But they discover a tape in John Kramer's belly that he swallowed during the events of Saw 3. A tape that is meant for big old bad boy Hoffman. But this segues us into one of the first traps of the movie, and Saw 4, for all its faults and messiness, at least they bring the fun factor back into the traps. We have 2 people who are tied up to this chain, one with their eyelids sewn shut and another one with their mouth sewed shut, so communication is going to be a problem here, and communication is actually the key to being able to survive this trap, because each one of them holds the key for each other's chains that will set them free. And while of course not a top tier trap, it brings back that fun quality I was mentioning, where you get to envision yourself in that situation, maybe put your best friend or your brother or cousin, whoever, on the opposite side of you and go, how would I survive this? Would I grab their hand, make them touch my lips, say, look, I can't talk, my friend? Do you Jedi mind trick send signals to the other person? Like, your mind starts racing and here we are, the fun of Saw, baby. Saw 4 will also introduce us to some new characters that'll be vital for the next couple of films, one of them being Agent Peter Strahm. That, look, if you know what happens in these next couple of movies, you basically know Hoffman and Strahm will be the enemies to one another, so I think it's such a wild choice that they picked 2 people that are supposed to be rivals and made them look almost identical. They got the same white face, jawline, super cuts, haircut. You cut from scene to scene, I'm like, who's talking right now? Because I know one of these was Hoffman a second ago. But Strahm is kind of a hard butt. He's really just wanting to catch Jigsaw and is tired of all the nonsense this precinct has had and how they just continue to lose officers. And in true Saw fashion, after meeting several different characters and introducing new ones, we finally meet the main character of this movie, Riggs, who has been part of the Saw franchise all the way back since Saw 2. Finally, it is his time to shine, and we follow yet again a detective trying to hunt down Jigsaw. He'll ultimately be put to the test to kind of get over his obsession with Jigsaw, where he's put on the path to help others in a way where they can only help themselves. Starting off with the first trap in his journey, a woman who is hair tied to this machine that'll continue to pull on her scalp unless he can punch in the combination codes in time to set her free. And even though I don't have long hair, I know that must be painful. I don't know if you've ever sat next to your sister, girlfriend, whatever, and have accidentally put your weight on their hair. They jump and shriek like something just has caught on fire. I swear, I'll just sit on the couch and she goes, ah! And I'm like, chill out, okay? I'm sorry. How about you wearing a ponytail then? Sorry, that was a personal thing. But even with Riggs helping her set free, she had a game of her own where Jigsaw let her know that probably safe to attack Officer Riggs because he will eventually put you back in prison. Ending their battle with the best Saw transition you will ever see. Martin Scorsese is taking notes, starting the trend that he should learn that every victim he goes to, only they can help themselves. And that definitely seems like a Jigsaw lesson. I just think the thing Saw 4 does better than Saw 3 is that although Saw 4 has that same kind of problem of being just very disgusting, cruel, the people in the traps feel a lot more deserving to the pain they go through. Like take for instance the hotel owner who's put in a room filled with red lights. It's kind of hard to feel bad for the trap he's put in where he has to get rid of his eyes when there's a tape of showing his crime on screen. And along with that tape, I feel like there's a lot of other triggering or just unsettling things to witness. Like we get another backstory from Jigsaw where we find out his ex-wife was actually pregnant. I've always remembered this part of the Saw story because it's pretty tragic the way she loses the baby. But I picked up something really weird this time around that I'm like, why? At one point, Jill Tuck, the wife of Jigsaw, says that the baby was planned in such a meticulous way by Jigsaw that they wanted the baby born on the Chinese calendar for the year of the pig. In fact, that's the year I was born. Oink oink, my friend. But mind you, that's before he goes through his entire tragedy and arc to become Jigsaw. What kind of man you gotta be where you really plan the birth of your child to the Chinese calendar? Is Jigsaw one of them Zodiac Starbucks girls that believes our signs determine whether we're compatible or not? Slay. Some of the issues I do have with Saw 4 though is like I feel like there was just no point in bringing back Eric Matthews. Maybe they just had a contractual obligation to have Donnie Wahlberg in there because he's made an appearance in every Saw movie since Saw 2 by now. But it just feels like he's just such a wasted character, especially with the way they end things off with him by the end of this movie. Like at this point, the guy still thinks his son is somewhere out there not alive. Just feels a little bit more depressing than, you know, horrifying like you would want from a horror film. I do want to say I like the trap of where the woman who is suffering abuse from her husband gets payback by pulling out these poles. She'll be able to heal from those punctures, but the husband will not. And I just thought like poetically, that was kind of like a great symbolic trap for their relationship. So really cool. Same goes for the trap that Cecil was put through where he has to force his way through the knives to get out of the chair. I'm someone that like cringes at the idea of a paper cut. So having to do that to your face, not pleasant. But ultimately bringing us to the ending, I guess you would want to say, twist of this movie that I feel is pretty weak, where we find out in order for Riggs to save Eric Matthews and everyone in that room is by him letting the time run out and letting the victims have the fate into their own hands, which was the entire lesson. That's like, okay, that's fine, that's cool. As an added bonus, you do get the twist that Saw 4 was happening at the exact same time as Saw 3. Maybe a little mind-blowing. If anything, to me, it's just more like, bro, Jigsaw is an organization master. How does he have like 10 different traps all happening at once while dealing with his own personal things? Man, can you handle my calendar, Jigsaw? But the bigger twist of the movie is the revelation that Hoffman is a secret apprentice and has been working with Jigsaw for a while.
Game over.
That is the giant revelation of this movie. And look, me right now as a Hoffman fan and knowing what he's about to go through in these next two sequels, it's cool. It's like, oh, this is the start of Hoffman. But first time watching this, you're just kind of like, this random cop that showed up for a few minutes in the last movie, he's really the mastermind behind it. And at this point, it was already getting tiring, the reveal of another Jigsaw apprentice. And this would only be the beginning of mysterious apprentices from the past of Jigsaw. So yeah, I understand why Saw 4 doesn't get talked about enough. While the traps are fun, creative, I feel like it suffers from having to set up a lot of the things that the sequels will play on from. You know, introducing newer characters, setting up the apprentice of Jigsaw, who's doing the games now that John Kramer's no longer alive, especially with the tape in Jigsaw's stomach promising that Hoffman will be tested for his position as apprentice. Like, yeah, it sets up cool stuff, but it has to go through all that setting up, which just isn't that fun. Bringing us to Saw 5, and this is a funny sequel to me because I both love and hate this movie. The part of me that loves Saw 5 is when it's dealing with the continuous story that they have now set up in Saw 4. Hoffman is the only living Jigsaw apprentice. He's the one currently carrying out the games in John Kramer's death, while Detective Peter Strahm is on his case, catching up closer and closer to figuring out Hoffman is Jigsaw. That's the part of the movie that I'm like, oh, this is interesting, this is thrilling, and then we have the side story they gotta throw in because not everybody's following the continuous story. And that's the side trap of the strangers thrown in here and what they have to go through. I am just not interested at all in that subplot. But kicking things off with the opening of the movie, we get a saw trap, but also an explanation to how Hoffman became a Jigsaw apprentice. Seth here, the victim put on this trap, is actually the man responsible for Hoffman's sister passing away. Hoffman is of course so broken and torn by this, he wants his revenge, so he frames Jigsaw, puts him in an unwinnable trap, and makes it look like Jigsaw is the one that got rid of him. As the movie will further elaborate, Jigsaw of course is not a fan of this, someone giving him credit for work he did not do, and kind of blackmails Hoffman into working for him, which would explain how Jigsaw was always able to get so much intel and information on different cops on this precinct, get research information on different criminals out there. Like, it was a good way to explain stuff. But even though that's interesting to like see and understand as the backstory of what was going on, I just feel like not everything needs an explanation from the past, and that's really what made some of these couple of Saw movies slightly confusing or just off-putting, because you have to keep up with so much jumping around from timeline to timeline, remembering, okay, we're going to an event that happened during Saw 3, now we're going into an event from Saw 2, this movie, that movie. Fun for the Saw fanatic watching these movies, but also super unappealing for a wider audience. But now knowing kind of the backstory of Hoffman here and his connection to Jigsaw, I want to go back to Detective Peter Strahm here, because boy, he deserves the Hoffman jingle for Saw 5.
Hello, Agent Strahm.
We last saw him almost catching Hoffman in the act when he's put on the path of being placed in his own trap. A trap that isn't supposed to be winnable at all and is just going to fill with liquid until he drowns, but the boy loopholes it like a true genius, pulls out his pen, and creates his own airway through his neck. I saw that for the first time in theaters as a kid, and I was mind blown. That was the biggest twist to happen since Saw 2, in my opinion. It instantly made me go, this guy right here, he better win. I want this man to take down Hoffman. And I really felt that way the entire time watching Saw 5. It was cool seeing him get closer and closer, figure out Hoffman's motivations and connections. This Strahm versus Hoffman arc was feeling like something straight out of an anime for me. I was like, oh God, when they fight, it's gonna be insane. But while I'm caught up with that insanity and that's what's keeping me glued to the screen, we keep cutting back to this real estate side mission. So let me just get my opinion of this out of the way. Ultimately, what we have here is a group of people who are responsible for a building that was burnt down that ended up taking the lives of 8 people. Each one had a small part in it. We had an investigative journalist who hid the story. We have the real estate agent that sold it, the person that caused the fire. All of them worked together to do this, so that's the theme of their trap. They're supposed to go through a series of rooms working together, enduring small pain each room until they get to the final room where it requires them to spill some cranberry juice. Still trying to hit that family friendly mark, okay, but you know what I mean. And that ends up being the partial twist of this movie, right? Is them realizing, oh, we were supposed to work together the entire time. In the beginning, we could have shared our keys to escape our chains. In the second room, we could have shared the bunks and second, we would have survived the explosion. In the third room, we just each needed to suffer a small electricity shock that would have opened the doors, and here we all just needed small little squeezes of cranberry juice to make it out alive. It's fine. It's just so uninteresting to me. I don't love it as a twist. I'm not big about it. To me, it just felt like an obvious thing they needed to throw in there because they were already telling a super connected soap opera dramatic story that it's like, this isn't going to be appealing to anybody whose first Saw movie is Saw 5. So I understand the need to put this in there, but this was just not an interesting one for me. But back to the interesting things that happen on in here. The showdown between Hoffman and Strom draws at a close. Hoffman knows that Strom is catching up on him and he needs to pull something quick. The tape lets him know that if he wants to survive, he's got to trust him and jump into the tank. That, of course, is not going to happen, but we get a small showdown between Hoffman and Strom where you think, oh, he's gonna win, he's gonna do it. And the anger I felt as a kid watching this movie from just like a story standpoint. I don't mean anger as in this was bad. Anger as in, no, I like that character. Good anger. That type of anger you get when you're like, oh, they were supposed to live. Stroffman ends up getting squished like a bug in a pretty horrific way, with the movie ending with Hoffman getting away with it all. That solidified my love-hate relationship with Hoffman. I know there's people out there who hate them, but that to me said, he's the worthy apprentice. He's the one that should carry it on. This boy cannot lose. Saw 5, major improvement from Saw 4, but mainly because I like where the story is headed. Saw 6. I mentioned in the first part of this review series when I was reviewing Saw 2, and I let you guys know Saw 2 was my personal favorite sequel. There was another film that comes very close to also being my personal favorite sequel, and that is Saw 6. And it's kind of sad saying that because the biggest memory I have about Saw 6 is the sad realization that Saw fans, we're just kicking off the franchise. Ever since Saw 2, I was going to the theater every October, every year, watching these movies, and the crowds were big at first. Saw 6, I remember opening weekend, Saturday, prime time, 2 other people in that theater with me and my dad. I was shocked. I was like, where are my Saw fans at, man? I like the clapping, hearing people scream and go, oh! It was so sad to see by the time we got to Saw 6. Finally, a really good Saw sequel. A lot of the audience gave up on the series. To me, the thing I think makes Saw 6 one of the better sequels, back to the levels of like Saw 1 and 2, is that it keeps both parts of the story interesting. I mentioned my main issue with Saw 5 is that I'm interested in the Saw overarching story with Hoffman and Jigsaw and whatnot, but the side story and traps with the real estate people could care less about that. Here with Saw 6, both stories are super interesting to me. So we kick things off here with a Saw trap of 2 people who have this device attached to their heads. They're informed that only one of them will be able to escape, and it'll be the person who can sacrifice the most body weight, place it on a scale, setting them free. I like to call this the body shame trap because, man, did they pull a funny one here. You telling me I would survive this trap? I have so much to give. Put me in there, boys. I also think the traps in Saw 6 are pretty unique on their own right, because for the most part, while we've only had 2 kinds of traps in the series so far, either winnable traps or unwinnable traps, the majority of Saw 6 traps are one person lives kind of traps. And that's kind of like a happy in-between medium for me, where it's like, I want to be able to have the survival part there, so someone walks out of there, but also kind of sucks that someone has to perish for the person to live. From there, we're treated to short glimpses of Hoffman cleaning up the remains of Detective Strom while we jump into the side story of William, a health insurance agent who determines whether they can cover you in sickness or in health. That becomes the elevated commentary of Saw 6, and I think is what helps it, brings it up a notch, is just how broken the American healthcare system is. I think one of the most memorable parts is this line from John Kramer about healthcare.
Did you know that in the Far East, people pay their doctors when they are healthy? When they're sick, they don't have to pay. We got it all ass backwards here. Piranha.
As a kid watching this for the first time, I really didn't understand a lot of this healthcare jargon, but as an adult who has to gone through some of this stuff, it is so sad seeing how, although exaggerated, it's pretty true to some health insurance companies out there. Because we find out the connection William has to Jigsaw is that he denied him coverage. Jigsaw found a very experimental practice that maybe could have guaranteed 30% to 40% survival rate, but they said, nah, it's a little too risky. That'll then become the basis for his traps, where he's put on the path to determine who lives or dies with the people he's worked with. And all in all, really great set of traps here, especially this first one, because it's not really like grotesque and gruesome, but it has that added healthcare quality to it. So he's put in a trap with a janitor who's wasted his lungs away by smoking most of his life, and to survive this trap, one of them must hold their breath as long as they can before the machine crushes them. The silent moments in when they're holding their breath and going against one another, really suspenseful stuff. And that's, I think, sometimes what is missing in a Saw trap. It doesn't just have to be about the exaggerated, body parts flying in your face. Something as simple as that can really elevate your heart rate. And for the most part, each trap he goes through has that same conundrum, with the most memorable one being the carousel trap, where he can only pick 2 of his employees to survive. While there's a bit of funny moments thrown in there with like the woman who lies about being pregnant.
I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. No, she's not. She's lying.
When they get down to the final person, it's kind of like a pretty heart-wrenching moment.
Oh, well, that's it, isn't it? It's over. I did it for you. Look at me. When you're killing me, you look at me.
But while William is going through these different mazes and trying to figure out who lives and dies, we cut back to some people trapped in cages.
Roderick, can you explain what you're doing in this photo?
That's not me.
That's not you?
Nope.
But this becomes the partial twist of the movie. The whole time they're leading you to believe that this is the wife and son of William, the insurance agent. But the twist becomes, no, this reportive investigative journalist who's been doing a lot of reports on Jigsaw is actually his family member, his sister. And the other 2 are family members of a denied patient that led to his death because William didn't want to give him coverage. Even though this is one of the smaller twists in this movie, I remember being mind blown by this during Saw 6. I was like, what?
It's not my game.
They got me good there, and it was all more sad when freaking Roderick Rules just pulls that lever and ends the life of William. Really great side story, but back to my soap opera here. Hoffman becomes aware of this final wish Jigsaw lays on Jill Tuck, his ex-wife, and decides he'll be the one to carry out this final trap just so that he can be done with it. It's very clear Hoffman doesn't really want to be Jigsaw. He's just been put on this situation. He's in the middle of it. A couple of games are going on, but you can clearly feel he's trying to get out of it by framing different people. I do love also that Saw 6 brought back Amanda, even if it's just to further back up Jigsaw's flawed logic.
And I brought proof that it works.
Amanda? It works. It's real.
The man has like a 2% success rate, and he thinks, I gotta keep going, babe. This is working. Sometimes. But really, I like it more because we get to see Hoffman and Amanda become aware of each other. That's something that becomes flawed throughout the other Saw sequels. Other apprentices were lurking about during this time, but really only Amanda and Hoffman were the only apprentices that knew about each other. I also love the later half in the movie where they get word that they can unscramble the Jigsaw voice, and it becomes a very tense moment of the police cracking down on Hoffman, leading to his voice reveal where he just ends up taking down these police officers. It was moments like that that just get me on the Hoffman train going, this guy can survive anything. And by the end, it feels that way, because we ultimately find out the biggest wish Jigsaw had and left to his wife Jill Tuck is to end the life of Hoffman. Jigsaw was very aware he was not the person to carry on the Jigsaw game, and he needs to be dealt with, but you clearly don't know the kind of man Hoffman is. He's a survivor. The furiosity Hoffman displays in breaking his own hand to free himself from the chair, trying to dismantle the trap on his head, to then getting insanely lucky by placing the trap in between two bars and getting out. Team frickin' Hoffman all the way. Yeah, Saw 6 really made that soap opera story arc that they started in Saw 4 really worth it. I like fully got invested again into the series, and I was curious what would happen, whether Hoffman would live or die. Is Jigsaw's wife Jill Tuck now gonna be the next apprentice and she takes up the mantle? So many possibilities were out there. But as I mentioned, the theater was not packed. The money was no longer there for Saw. It was time to end things, and they'll attempt to in a horrible, horrible fashion with the next movie. Let me know what you guys thought about these past 3 Saw movies. Which is your favorite out of 4, 5, and 6? Do you like the overarching story they try to go with? Does it get overly complicated? What about some of the side traps? Anything and everything, be sure and like, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. This was a family-friendly video, YouTube.